everyone. Happy Memorial Day. Thank you to all of you who have served or know someone who has served our country. I appreciate it and I thank you very much. I hope you got to at least um, participate in some festivities today, whether it was a parade or a barbecue or whatever you could I guess, participate in while taking a summer class, and I assume working and taking care of children and all of your other job responsibilities. So hopefully today you got to at least have some relaxation. I know some of you work, so that may not have come true. So I just want to recap last week and then talk about the week coming up. So last week we covered session 3 and session 4. This week we're going to be covering session 5, which is sustainability, and then we will be covering session 6, which is food. If you notice here, food requires that you've watched the film Food Incorporated. That doesn't mean that you looked at the website or you watched a YouTube clip. It means that you watched the film. The film is available on lots of different avenues. There are some illegal avenues, and of course I can't get into that, but there are legal ways. You can rent it from your local library, you can get it off of Amazon, you can rent it off of Amazon, you can get it through Netflix. So there's lots of different ways. Sometimes it's on Netflix, sometimes it isn't, but there's all different ways that you can get a hold of the film to watch. It's a good film. It's not something that I think you'll be bored with. So make sure that you watch the film in order to answer the forum post questions by Wednesday, 11:59. So briefly, this is what we have this week. You have session 5, which is sustainability. You have session 5, forum posts due by Wednesday, and session 6, food due by Wednesday, 11:59. Initial posts, response posts for each session due by Friday, 11:59. And this week you only have one quiz because sustainability is not a full chapter. In the textbook, you only have a quiz due by next Sunday for food. The other thing is that if you notice under the sustainability session, you'll see the review for the midterm exam. Make sure that you start typing out the answers for your midterm exam. Your midterm exam, along with other work, will be due by June 10th. So make sure you keep that in your calendar. You'll have one full week that you can choose to take the midterm exam. You get one chance though. So once you begin the midterm exam, you have to finish the midterm exam in that session. So you get 3 hours to take the midterm exam. That sounds like a lot of time, but actually it's 10 essay questions. So it's best that you type out the answers to the questions on the midterm exam review before the midterm and then copy and paste those answers, their full paragraph requirements, into the exam portal. So technically this is an open book exam. You have the questions before the exam, you have the information available to you for all of the answer all of the questions. It's just up to you to type out those answers before the midterm and then copy and paste them into the portal the day of or that week. You choose one day out of that week or 3 hours out of that week to take your midterm exam. I will try and make a video in the middle of this week that will give you some more information on the midterm exam. But first of all, I just want to cover last week. So last week we covered session 3 and session 4. Pricing the price list was a great good indication of what a cost-benefit analysis is, and valuing ecosystems, which is covered in chapter 2.4 of your textbook. And this deals with the fact of what is our willingness to pay to conserve the environment. So how much are we willing to pay to implement a rule or a regulation that will save a specific amount of lives? Now remember, we're not going to save everyone's life. It's the best bang for your buck. So unfortunately, there will be people who get cancer and who die, but they have to look at the cost-benefit analysis in terms of what's the regulation, what's the limitation, how much that's going to cost people to implement versus how many lives that's going to save. And so that is what the cost-benefit analysis is. There's big problems with it though, and the problems are also discussed in your textbook, which is what is the willingness people are willing to spend. A lot of times people are willing to spend more money on furry creatures than they are on bacteria, even though bacteria may be more more important to an ecosystem than the furry creature? So there's all sorts of questions. Then that's their willingness to pay, but actually when they go to them and knock on their door and tell them, okay, it's time to pay up, all of a sudden that willingness to pay versus what they're actually going to pay are two different things. For example, this is a good topic to talk about today. The price of a bald eagle. What were people willing to pay to save the bald eagle? And maybe to a military family, because that's the symbol of the military, they might be willing to spend more than someone who may be detached from the United States. So there's all sorts of questions involved with that. The story of cap and trade, a lot of you not very many of you answered this question, but you will find it on your midterm exam. So cap and trade, make sure you watch the story of cap and trade. What are the issues with cap and trade, etc. A lot of you answered the environmental justice piece. Remember that environmental justice goes across all boundaries, all race. Most of the time it used to be race related, but now it has actually shifted a little bit to those who are not educated and those that do not have enough time or money to fight the battle. So a couple students talked about that, is that, you know, a lot of times maybe people couldn't show up to town meeting because they had to work. So a lot of times environmental injustice takes place in places where there is a gender issue, a lack of income issue, or a lack of education of the folks that live in that neighborhood. Yes, race does still play a role, but actually we're starting to see that filter out a little bit more, and that environmental injustices do take place across all racial demographics. Of course, in the past, it definitely did happen in a lot more African American neighborhoods. So that was a lot of the the ethics, economics, and policy. The other thing is consumption and waste, the story of stuff. One of the key points that I want you to remember with the linear system is that the issue with why we cannot survive on a linear system has to do with the fact that it's a line. A linear system is a line. And when there's a line, there's only an input and an output. And that output, the problem is the trash, or that output, or the used resources are never put back into the input again. So what happens is we only have an input and an output, which is in stuff, out garbage, right? And that garbage is never put back into that input again. With a closed loop system, though, we think about that end product and what will happen with it and how it can get put back into the input again. So what can we do with the trash? When we create objects, we need to think about what's going to be at the end and how we can reuse what comes out at the end to get put back in. What can be recycled, and not just recycled once, but could be recycled more than once into new products. So that's that. A lot of you answered the consumption buys happiness piece. A lot of you are taking it too personal instead of looking at the factual basis of it. The factual basis is the fact that, yes, consumption does buy a happiness up to a certain dollar value, and then after that we see no gains on that. So it's about $70,000 to $75,000. After that, we actually do not see any happiness after that value added to people's lives. In fact, they actually become less happy because they want more and more and more and more. And instead, social connectedness and leisure consumption, which create memories, is something that's there. A lot of you did a good job answering the shared economy question, so you did a good job there. And what are the social aspects of the social issues with creating a consumption environment? Well, there's a lot. Number one, lack of happiness. The United States is actually, I think, number 16 or 17 on the list of happiest countries, and one of the reasons for that is that we are a consumer-based country. We just want things instead of the social connectedness with other people. And so the consumption, the environment, a lot of those social aspects are, number one, we are unhappy. Number two, we are the most obese nation in the world. And that's because we're not as socially connected as we used to be, meaning we don't get out and do activities as much. And then some of the other things is that we really definitely have forgotten about third world countries. We just think that we're better than them, and that because they supply our products to us, we just don't think about what those aspects are. And we'll talk about that this week in sustainability. So what is fair trade? Fair trade is paying people an equitable wage, giving them health care, thinking about the people who are producing your dollar store products, your other products, thinking about the hazards we're putting them in, and why do we want such cheap products instead of spending more money and having one thing? Why do we want so many other things that are cheaper products that we're in that throwaway disposable economy, and there has to be a better way. So there is sustainability, which is that companies that you would support, you're going to spend more for those products, but you don't need as many products. So, one t-shirt instead of 10 t-shirts in the fast fashion industry, where people are tied or chained to the sewing machines to create our cheap Zahara and H&M products. Why not spend more money and buy one very good quality blouse from a company that actually practices sustainability? And sustainability means that there is a social, an economic, and an environmental portion to the company. It can't have one without the other. It has to have all three. So that's really big. What would happen if we did demand these products? Remember, our pocketbooks are the thing that tells these companies what we want them to do. So if we stop buying from these fast fashion industries or these other stores, what would happen if we decided that we wanted to push people to produce better products and actually treat the people that produce those products in a certain way? The other thing is food. So food is another thing, another cheap industry where we produce this fast food, but actually it costs us more in the end in obesity and healthcare costs. There's a lot of issues that are going on with food. I want you to watch the film first so that you get ideas of what's going on with our food system, but it is being run by corporate boardrooms instead of actual farmers. And we are portrayed to think that it's being run by farmers, that our chicken is being produced, killed out on a farm, when in reality that's not what's happening. The problem is that yes, we subsidize cheap food because we are a corn-driven nation, but when we do that and we make that food cheap, there's other problems that certain socio-demographics are going to suffer, which is one of them is obesity, heart problems, etc. And this is a big problem, why the government won't subsidize good food. We do allow now a little bit more than ever SNAP and food stamps and other benefits to be used at farmers markets, and they'll be coming around now. So farmers markets are starting to open, so some areas will have more access to fresh produce, etc. But it doesn't solve the problem altogether. So you'll see that. But there's a really good study here that why making healthy food is not good enough. This is a great study that was done that, made healthy food cheaper, but what happened is people bought junk food with the food left over, with the money left over. So there's another issue there that's underlying that we need to address as well. Just making healthy food cheap is not going to solve all of our food problems. So I want you to look at those. So just to round up a little bit, number one, next week you have due session 4, 5, and 6. You have initial posts due by Wednesday, response posts for each session due by Friday. You have a quiz for food due by next Sunday. Don't forget to start preparing for your midterm exam. You'll have a lot due next week. So you want to make sure that you plan ahead now, because you will have a lot due next week. You'll have 2 sessions due, as well as 2 quizzes and the midterm. So make sure you start planning ahead for next week. As always, reach out if you have any questions, and I look forward to your posts due by Wednesday. Have a fantastic week.